Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Flawless Talk. Today, I am joined by Kendra Jacobson, who is the Director of Organ Programs for Oregon Post-Adoption Resource Center and a longtime friend of the Flawless Foundation. And I'm excited to dive into all the impactful work that she is doing. So thank you for joining us today, Kendra. Of
Thank you so much, Trey. It's exciting to be here
course,
and hanging out with you on a Wednesday morning.
not a bad work day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so being in Oregon, Kendra is out west, so we're dealing with a little bit of a time change here, but she woke up bright and early to have this interview today, so we appreciate that.
Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it.
Yeah, dive into things here at Flawless with to start interviews with asking people how they are really doing. And this started just because, so often everyday life we hear the question, "Oh, how you doing?" And it's, "Oh, I'm great, I'm fine, I'm good." And then that's basically it. So at Flawless, we really like to take a second, take a step back, and really ask people, how they're actually doing. So Kendra, how are you really doing today?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Trey, because of course my first answer is great. Everything's fabulous. But if I pause to think about it, I have a lot on my plate.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of pain out there that our organization is working to try to support and help and heal. So, that weighs heavy on you all the time. So I'd say doing pretty well, but remaining mindful that there's hard times and tough times, around me. Yeah.
Exactly
Yeah.
right. And that's a great way to answer it. We appreciate your honesty and kind of taking a second to really feel your feelings and feeling your emotions. So we do appreciate you sharing that. But diving more into who you are, my first introduction to you, Kendra, was through a heartwarming story about your connection with our founder Janine Francolini. For those who don't know, Janine's been all over the map, including a stint in Oregon. So can you just share with everyone more about that connection with you and Janine?
Yes, Janine and I go back quite a number of years at this point. We were really fortunate enough to have our sons in school together for a stretch at the time. And I just remember even back then being so struck by Janine and her energy and her enthusiasm and her passion. Like if something was going to get done, you knew Janine could get it done, whatever it was. And it was really meaningful when I then discovered later on that she had this flawless foundation, which at first I wasn't aware of because it was all about the parenting part and the kids. And that really struck a chord because of course it's a key part of our work. And to hear her story and that she had dedicated herself to then really bringing the flawless foundation to fruition as a result of her own personal experiences was really striking. And I was just really impressed. And so I've kind of followed the flawless foundation here in the shadows ever since.
Yeah, and we appreciate you being a friend of ours. So yeah, thank you for kind of going down memory lane for us. And well, now kind of get more into your work. You've mentioned, or as mentioned, you work as a director for the Oregon Post Adoption Resource Center. So, do you mind just kind of telling us a little bit more about the mission of this organization and some of the work that you guys are all doing?
Yeah, so the Oregon Post Adoption Resource Center, or ORPARC, as we're typically known, we serve all of the foster, adoptive, guardianship, and kinship parents in the state of Oregon who are caring for state-involved children, as well as supporting the workers and the different community providers and the therapists who are supporting them. So we really end up with a pretty broad cross section of all of, or intersection rather, of all of these different populations who are really working hard, to sort of uplift kids who are feeling really vulnerable. And as I'm sure you know too, a lot of people who work in the field come with their own, sort of mental health and trauma challenges and histories. And so when you're supporting these kids, it's not just supporting the kids, right? You really have to be uplifting and holding all of the adults around them in order to help those adults stay strong or be vulnerable at the times they need to really be there for the kids. So it's really holistic work. It's hard work, but it's also something that we love because we can bring resources, information out into the community in different ways that maybe folks wouldn't have found it otherwise.
And as you said, this is hard work. definitely sounds like it is, but it's also very important work. So for you specifically, what inspired you to kind of end up on this pathway?
Well, that's a great question. I was always really interested in psychology and sociology. And after a short stint teaching preschool, I couldn't stop thinking about what all the kids were thinking about. It was really fun to play and, of course, read children's books and come up with games and arts and crafts. But it was always why were they behaving how they were behaving? So I ended up getting a master's in counseling psychology. And I started out as a mental health therapist at Oregon Health Science University in the outpatient child and adolescent psychiatry unit, where I actually ended up working coincidentally with a number of children and families who were associated with child welfare situations, adoption, foster care, et cetera. And then from that, it sort of just, I wound my way through time into this field, pretty quickly and have stayed here ever since. It's been close to 30 years. And I'd say, I'm probably just as passionate about it as I was in the beginning. It's There's just so many people who are impacted by topics like foster care, adoption, trauma, mental health. I mean, it's everywhere. And so it just feels like really integral work to everyone's everyday.
Yeah, and I mean, thank you for doing that. That's definitely, like you said, important work that we love to hear is being done. And kind of just diving more into a lot of things that you guys are doing. You told us that this week is actually National Library Week, so I guess we're in
Yes.
the midst of that
Woohoo.
right. And you
Yeah.
guys have an amazing project called the Culture Connection Collection. So what exactly is this project, and how can we all, support you all?
Yes. So the Culture Connection Collection is what we are considering a really innovative and unprecedented library project that we were really fortunate to get an opportunity through an LSTA grant through the State Library of Oregon. So it's all thanks to them. It's actually a federal grant. And it enabled us to work with cultural consultants here in Oregon. And they are all people of color or um, transracially parenting. They're
Mm,
all foster adoptive parents and or foster adoptee youth or those with lived experience. And they're all writers or illustrators of children's books. So it's this amazing sort of collection among them of expertise and experience that can then inform a collection that's designed to uplift children of color in care specifically, to boost their mental health, to strengthen their well-being, and to give them racial and cultural mirrors in the children's literature in all of these different books, as well as for the caregivers who are supporting them, since that's something that's been lacking in so much literature, historically. So it's really, a new way of helping caregivers and of course the other providers around them share this inspiration with kids so that they can see and read all of these gorgeously illustrated books by people of color, for people of color, with their topics, stories, themes, heroes, heroines that they can really look to, especially in these times of need when they might be suffering or experiencing hardships. And I think we can all really relate to the magic of losing ourselves in a book or of an adult reading us books that just literally changed our lives. We seized onto that theme or that story or that character, and they were the ones that then carried us through. Jamaica Haynes Lewis, who was Miss USA 2 years ago, we did an interview with her a couple years ago, just actually 2 years ago, and she talked about how when she was in foster care, that reading these different children's books that she came across, she really felt like were helped sort of saved her soul because she was able to relate to the suffering of the characters, to the hardships they were going through, but yet see the light at the end of the tunnel, to know that she too could survive and find that inner resilience and strength to make it through. So it can be really powerful. And if you'll indulge me just one more piece, reading children's books with kids, speaking of, hearkening back to those preschool teaching years for me, it's a fantastic way to attach and bond with other people. not just with little children, right? When you snuggle close up with someone to read a book, to read a passage, or to read a quote in a book, you're connecting. Maybe your bodies are even touching in a safe way, right? And so it can be really significant for the healing process.
Wow, that is.
That's a mouthful. Sorry, Trey.
But I loved it. Especially kind of, I've never saw, reading as something. I've always seen it as like an isolated event, and hearing you kind of talk about the benefits outside of, just, obviously falling in love with the hero or heroine, and kind of finding that escape, but also just an opportunity to connect with someone else or a little one. That's just a take on reading that I've never kind of thought about. And we will have more on reading, and I'll have more thoughts on that as well. Uh,
Excellent.
but something else you also did mention is that the month of May, that's coming up soon, is National Foster Care Month. I know this is, quite intertwined with a lot of what you're doing. So when you hear that there's a month dedicated to spreading awareness to this community, how impactful is that really?
I think it can really impact all sorts of people. If they can hear about that, it can help inspire them to think, well, what can I do to help kids in foster care? Maybe I can't necessarily foster, which of course is really important. All of the states, every one of them, Oregon, Florida, you name it, they all really need foster parents,
Mhm.
more foster parents, caring, dedicated, committed foster parents. But even if you can't foster, there's still other things you can do to help kids in foster care. And so for us with the Culture Connection Collection, part of what it comes with is we've got books to give away here in Oregon for kids of color in care. And so that's something that people can help us do, is make sure we're getting the books out to kids. But in everywhere else around the nation, I mean, that's another thing people can do, is maybe figure out, well, how can you get books to kids in foster care in your area? At your nearest branch or at your nearest agency or something. That's sort of a way to, to make it all come together.
Oh wow, that's awesome. So that's always good to know. And May is not just National Foster Care Month, uh, an opportunity to kind of bridge our two lives together. It's also Mental Health Awareness Month. So I'm just kind of on the topic of Awareness Month. What do you think is one of the most important things about mental health that people should be more aware of, whether in general or specific to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think what's sort of synonymous across all of these different pieces is that, mental health really comes hand in hand with grief and loss. Grief and loss can be the trigger that, has someone move into a really difficult time in their mental health life, or just having a mental health condition can really make us feel a lot of grief and loss internally and those around us, grief for what we felt like before, or grief and loss in terms of mourning what we might be like or feel like if we weren't struggling with this mental health condition. Um, as well as so many mental health conditions too, just come with those feelings of, um, pain and, fear or anxiety, which also then go hand in hand with grief and loss. I actually have a couple quotes that I'd love to read you, Trey, that
Yeah.
are sort of, intersections of all of these. Dr. Frank Anderson, he's a grief and trauma expert, and he writes, trauma blocks love and connection, and love and connection is what heals trauma. Dr. David Kessler writes, we can't heal what we don't feel.
Mm.
The only way out of the pain is through the pain. And of course, David Kessler is well-known grief expert. He co-wrote books with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And of course, we have his books in the Orr Park Library here in Oregon. And then Maya Angelou, this is just one of my favorite quotes of all time, period, because it is so applicable just across the universe. And she writes, and I'm sure you've heard it before, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. And I think that really captures mental health everywhere. Because when you're struggling with that pain inside, it's really a story that you have, and you have a narrative that goes with it, maybe a narrative that you're hiding and that you're needing to keep underneath, under wraps. And part of the path to healing, obviously, besides there's lots of different interventions or solutions for mental health that some of us really need, whether that's medication, certain types of therapy, exercise, all sorts of different things. But what is the same is we need to get that story out, right? We need to be able to talk about it. We need to be able to share that grief, that trauma, that loss. And that is what brings us on the healing path, which of course is what Dr. David Kessler is referring to.
I don't know if you noticed, I actually rearranged my next question with that previous question because I just had a feeling that you were gonna fall so much better into it. So we just talked grief, trauma, healing, being
Yeah,
vulnerable, letting things out.
yeah.
So the next question, the interchange question is hearing all that, talking about all that, what do you do for self-care? What do you do for healing? Because me personally, we are talking about, I said we're gonna go back to reading. We're talking about the National Library Week and everything. I do love to escape into a good book, and the word escape is very important there. I
Yeah.
just feel like if you read a good book, specifically one where there's an admirable hero or something, I just feel like it's so easy to get lost and just enjoy that world and be very present in that moment. And that's when, like, one of my top self-care tips, just that opportunity to kind of take a break from the world, all the stress that you're kind of under, and just escape into another world. I really do appreciate those moments. And so, getting it back to you, I feel like you've just so perfectly set yourself up to dive into what you do specifically for self-care and healing. So what is it that you do, Kendra?
Oh, Trey. Now you got me, right? I walked right into that trap.
Oh, it did.
um, well, obviously for my work, I do so much reading, tons of reading. I can't possibly ever get to all the reading I want to do. So for me, reading isn't actually my outlet. I'd say my outlets for self-care are writing. I
Mm,
really get excited about writing and writing projects. I tend to create a little too many for myself, but I do love it. And also beverages. So making tea, drinking water. Technically, this isn't really a hint commercial, but um, and actually, there's even some studies done through TBRI, trust-based relational intervention, which show that children really need like snack or water every 2 hours in order to be at their best.
wow.
And I'd say, that really goes for adults too. I mean, obviously we not necessarily if we're snacking on, French fries or potato chips or cookies or something, but like a healthy snack, but mostly water. And then the other part, which is easy here in Oregon, is getting out in nature. And again, that's studied. It's researched, it's proven. Science shows that getting out in nature, even just seeing trees and greenery, is really uplifting for humans and actually improves their mental health and well-being. And so just wandering around the backyard, looking at the plants and the flowers and that kind of thing is something that I find really important to do.
Wow. No, those are all overlapping with a lot of what we try to talk about in pre-care flaws as well.
Yeah.
Nature, um, you know, proper nutrition, things of that nature. So
Yeah.
it's always good to kind of hear that from someone else that's as knowledgeable as you. So we do appreciate you kind of sharing your tips.
Well,
Um,
I've been following Flawless all this time, so who knows? Maybe I learned them from you guys, Trey.
maybe. But yeah, Ken, before we get to our final question, like I said, we definitely want to continue to support and uplift and promote a lot of the important work that you are doing. So is there anything that you could tell us, just some ways that we could continue to support what you guys are doing over there and just your community and your population?
Yeah, I think something that would be beneficial for folks as well as would be lovely for us too is checking out the Culture Connection collection page. We have a
Mm,
page that we can share with you. And what's most important about that page is it highlights the stars of the show. And those are the cultural consultants. For instance, Brian and Josie Parker are children's book illustrators, authors, and publishers. And they have this incredible website called Believe in Wonder, where it shows all of the 17 books that they've written and illustrated. And they're amazing books. incredible illustrations, and everyone everywhere should know about them. There's another national writer named Melissa Hart, and she's a transracial adoptive parent, and her daughter also participated in the Culture Connection collection, which is a really neat achievement for her. And she's written all sorts of books, as well as she appears regularly in like the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, Oregon Quarterly, lots of different publications. And then there's another cultural consultant named Nabil Zarazef, and he wrote a children's book called A Kid's Book About Adoption with an adoptee who was a student of his at the time. And so checking that out is great. We also have resource pages on all sorts of topics related to mental health that are just open resource pages that anyone can visit. And Trey, I'll make sure that you have some of those because they've got some great, tips, different videos that we found that we think are really good articles on everything from trauma to ACEs, to other parenting approaches, mindfulness, things like that. And then finally, we also have a new ORPARK Short Supports video series. And these are whimsical animated video shorts that are on topics like sensory issues and touch, feeling safe, grief and loss, play, the importance and power of play, which we cannot possibly emphasize more, and a few other videos. And those, again, they're open for sharing. They're all purpose, and I'll share links with you too, Trey, on those.
Yeah, definitely. We'll plug some of these to this to this video, and some of those other links and resources will get shared on our channels and our different platforms. So, those
Nice.
are all great tips, and we'll do everything we can to support you guys in the work that you're doing. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Trey. Did you have
But
more questions?
yeah, before we let you go, I do have one final question. So, here at Flawless, we do have this concept of a flawless world. So it's, think of it as an ideal type of society. For me, when I think of a flawless world, specifically to the work that we do here at Flawless, it's one where everyone accepts brain health to be the same as physical health. I always tell people I envision a world where everyone, talks openly about the doctor they go to. They talk openly about the dentist, like, oh, my dentist is great. Come check them out. I'd love everyone to kind of have that same type of conversation for brain health, and for mental health professionals that they're have a great relationship with. It just be that easy of a conversation instead of it being something that a lot of times we're a little bit more quiet about. So I see a flawless world being one where we're a lot more open to discussing something, because the brain is an organ just like any other organ, so we should treat it as such. That's a flawless world for me. But when you think of a flawless world, what do you kind of envision?
Well, Trey, everything that you said was absolutely so eloquent and spot on. And that's really what we all here at Ord Park believe as well. And I think maybe the angle or the twist that we'd have on that same concept is that everyone is able to understand that behavior is communication. So that when each of us is acting in a certain way, it's reflecting what's going on in our brain health, right? And how we're feeling and our bodies. And that's really, really, really important when you're parenting. And it's also really important when you're having difficult relationships or conversations or interactions with others. Instead of just assuming, oh, that person is just unpleasant, or, oh, why are they being so grumpy? Instead, realizing, hey, they may be suffering from a mental health condition. Maybe they've experienced some trauma lately or some grief and loss. And instead, let's try to be curious and let's understand. I mean, sort of like the Bruce Perry Oprah book, which is what happened to you, not what's wrong with you, or not why are you doing that. It's like, let's be kind, empathetic and curious, and just wonder, hey, I wonder what's happening with them first. And then secondly, taking that quick moment of reflection to think, well, what can I do to help? How can I maybe make this situation better, or help this person feel better, or help everyone in this situation to feel a little more comfortable? And so I think that would be my vision of a flawless world where we all did that all the time.
Yeah, no, that's a world that I'd love to live in. And definitely you did a great job plugging in our advisory board member Bruce Perry. He has a lot of great resources in regards to that. And that is a
Oh,
great book
yes.
as well.
Yeah.
But I do want to thank you so much for your time and inspiration today, Kendra. For all those watching this video or listening, you can connect with Kendra and her mission by visiting their website and Facebook links that we will definitely plug in the description, as well as a host of those other resources we'll get connected on and make sure that those get shared out as well. But thank you so much again, Kendra. Enjoy the rest of your morning over there.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Trey. This is pretty fun. I wouldn't mind doing this every morning.
Maybe we'll get something together. We'll talk to Janine about it. But thank you so much and enjoy your day.
Yeah, thanks.